This ship froze $60 billion. For 6 days in 2021, one wrong turn in Egypt shut down 12% of global trade. The internet made memes about a tiny excavator trying to move a mountain. But while everyone laughed, the people running the global economy were having a very different reaction, because they realized something terrifying. The whole system runs through a few narrow choke points, and there's no real like-for-like backup. This is a failure chain. This is the Suez Canal, a 120-mile ditch carved through the Egyptian desert. It looks narrow, it looks boring, and it is the single most important shortcut on Earth. Before the canal opened in 1869, ships going from Asia to Europe had to sail all the way around Africa. That journey added 4,000 extra miles, 10 to 14 days of sailing, and hundreds of thousands of dollars in fuel. The canal changed everything. It connected the Red Sea to the Mediterranean and compressed the globe. By 2021, about 19,000 ships a year were using it. That's one ship every 20 minutes during peak hours, just a constant conveyor belt of cargo moving between Asia and Europe. Oil tankers, container ships stacked with electronics, furniture, medicine, car carriers, bulk freighters with grain and coal. If it moves between Asia and Europe, it probably went through Suez. Egypt was making about $5.6 billion a year in toll fees. The canal wasn't just important to global trade, it was the backbone of Egypt's economy. But there was a problem that had been building for decades. Ships were getting huge. In the 1980s, a large container ship might carry 3,000 containers. By 2000, 6,000 containers. By 2020, over 24,000 containers. Why build something that massive? Because shipping companies discovered that bigger ships are cheaper to run. One crew, one engine, way more cargo per voyage. The cost per container drops as ships scale up. By doubling the size, they cut fuel costs per box by nearly 25%. Over the lifetime of a ship, that's hundreds of millions in pure profit. Except canals don't scale with ships. The Suez Canal has been widened a few times, but it's still fundamentally a trench through sand and clay. By 2021, we were driving 400-meter ships through sections that were barely 200 meters wide at the bottom. The margin for error wasn't slim, it was zero, and on March 23rd, the margin ran out. Let's look at the ship itself. The Ever Given, 400 meters long, longer than the Eiffel Tower is tall, 59 meters wide. Fully loaded, it weighs 220,000 tons. On March 23rd, it was carrying about 18,000 containers, roughly $700 million worth of cargo. Electronics, furniture, bikes. That morning, the Ever Given entered the southern single-lane section of the canal, heading north. The weather was not cooperating. Winds were hitting 40 to 50 knots, strong enough to make steering difficult. A sandstorm was sweeping across the canal zone, cutting visibility. Now, a fully loaded container ship stacked 7 stories high is aerodynamically a giant wall. The wind hits it like a sail. Every ship transiting Suez has an Egyptian canal pilot aboard to guide them through. But pilots don't control the ship, they advise. The captain and crew still operate the engines and rudder. Around 7:45 a.m., something went wrong. The Ever Given started to yaw, rotating off its heading. The bow began drifting toward the eastern bank. The stern swung toward the western bank. The crew tried to correct. Rudder adjustments, engine power changes. But in shallow water, corrections can overshoot. You turn the wheel, nothing happens, nothing happens. Then suddenly, way too much happens. By 7:49 a.m., just 7 minutes after entering this section, the Ever Given was diagonal across the canal. The bow slammed into the eastern embankment. It didn't just touch the dirt. It buried itself roughly 18 meters deep. About 6 stories of sand and clay wrapped around the bulbous bow like concrete setting. The stern wedged into the opposite side. The Suez Canal was now blocked by 200,000 tons of steel, and it wasn't going anywhere. Within hours, ships started piling up. First, the ships already in the canal behind the Ever Given, stuck with nowhere to go. Then ships arriving at the southern entrance, dropping anchor, waiting. Then more at the northern entrance doing the same. And this is where the scale becomes almost incomprehensible. The Suez Canal handles about $9.6 billion worth of trade every day. That means every hour the canal stayed blocked. $400 million frozen. Every minute, $6.7 million. Every single second, $110,000. By day 2, 200 ships waiting. By day 3, over 300 ships. By day 6, more than 400 vessels stuck at anchor. Engines burning fuel, going nowhere. Some captains looked at the growing traffic jam and made a decision. Turn around, sail around the entire African continent, add 10 days to the voyage, burn an extra $750,000 in fuel, because waiting for an unknown duration was worse. But it wasn't just about ships waiting at anchor. Modern factories run on just-in-time delivery. Parts arrive exactly when needed. Zero buffer, zero extra inventory sitting in warehouses. It's efficient, it's cheap, until the parts don't arrive. Factories in Europe started running out of components. Automotive assembly lines slowed, then stopped. Electronics manufacturing hit delays, furniture production backed up, and then the weird shortages started appearing. Robusta coffee beans, mostly shipped from Vietnam to Europe, spiked in price. Tapioca pearls for bubble tea ran short. The UK faced a garden gnome shortage because the raw materials were stuck on a ship somewhere in the Red Sea. I'm not joking. That actually happened. But the darkest part of the cargo wasn't garden gnomes. At least 20 ships in that queue were carrying livestock. Hundreds of thousands of sheep and cattle being transported from Romania to the Middle East. These ships carry limited food and water. They're designed to move, not to wait. By day 4, animal welfare groups were doing math nobody wanted to do about how long those supplies would last. And here's the thing that still breaks my brain about this moment. While the internet made jokes about the excavator, logistics managers around the world were having serious conversations about whether modern civilization could actually function without the Suez Canal. The answer, by the way, is not without things getting very expensive and very chaotic, very fast. Egypt threw everything they had at the problem. Dredgers sucking up sand and mud. That excavator that became internet famous was actually working non-stop, clawing away at 20,000 cubic meters of sediment wrapped around the bow. Tugboats pulling with hundreds of tons of force. For 5 days, the ship didn't budge, not an inch. The salvage specialists, Smith Salvage, the company you call when enormous things go catastrophically wrong, started looking at Plan B. If they couldn't pull the ship free, they'd have to lighten it. That meant unloading the containers, all 18,000 of them, one by one. The problem? The Ever Given is so tall that normal port cranes can't reach the top containers. They'd need to bring in floating cranes or even heavy-lift helicopters. The math on that? Weeks, possibly months. Lloyd's List was tracking $400 million in losses every single hour. If they'd had to unload thousands of containers one by one, we're talking about cascading economic disruption that would ripple through supply chains for the rest of the year. But there was an even worse scenario. The Ever Given was supported at the bow and stern, but the middle section was floating. As the tide went in and out, the middle of the ship sagged. The hull was under immense stress. If the steel cracked, the ship could snap in half. Then you don't have a blockage for 3 months. You have oil spills, environmental disaster, and a sunken ship blocking the canal for years. They needed something to change, and they got help from 240,000 miles away. A king tide, caused by a supermoon, when the moon is closest to Earth in its orbit. It raised the water level in the Suez Canal by about 46 centimeters. That's 18 inches. Not a dramatic wave, not a movie-style surge, just a few dozen extra centimeters of water. But when you're trying to float a 220,000-ton ship that's wedged in sand, every centimeter matters. On March 29th, day 6, 14 tugboats coordinated for one final attempt. Dredgers cleared the last of the sediment. The tugs pulled. The moon pulled. Early in the morning, around 4:30 a.m., the stern swung free. Progress, finally. By mid-afternoon, around 3:05 p.m., after one more coordinated effort, the bow tore loose from the embankment. For the first time in 6 days, the Ever Given was floating in the middle of the canal. Horns blasted. People cheered. The canal reopened. The 400-ship traffic jam started moving. The memes stopped. The ship was free, but the nightmare wasn't over. Egypt seized the ship and initially demanded over $900 million in compensation. The crew was stuck on board for 3 months while the lawyers fought. Companies with cargo on board had to pay a general average fee just to get their own products back. It was the final insult. Finally, in July, a secret settlement was reached. The ship sailed. The crew went home. The world went back to normal. Except, it didn't. Because here's what the Ever Given actually exposed. A massive share of global trade runs through 4 narrow choke points. The Suez Canal, 12% of global trade. The Panama Canal, 6% of global trade. The Strait of Hormuz, about 20% of the world's oil. The Strait of Malacca, most shipping between Asia and everywhere else. Any one of these, for any reason, Weather, accident, conflict, terrorism could do exactly what the Ever Given did. And there's no real like-for-like backup. We spent 50 years optimizing for efficiency, removing inventory, removing buffers, removing waste. Just-in-time delivery means everything arrives exactly when needed, which works beautifully when nothing goes wrong. But we removed every safety margin to save a few percentage points on the bottom line. So when one thing fails, everything cascades. 3 years after the Ever Given, on March 26, 2024, another ship crashed into the Francis Scott Key Bridge in Baltimore. The bridge collapsed. 6 people died. The Port of Baltimore shut down for months. Same problem, same cascade, same realization that one failure can break an entire system. We didn't learn anything. The next time it happens, and it will happen, we might not have a supermoon to save us. We're running the modern world on razor-thin margins, and eventually the margin runs out. The Ever Given is still sailing today, still carrying containers across the world, still passing through narrow canals, and every single day we're making the same bet, that the weather will cooperate, that human error won't happen, that the physics will work out, that one ship in one place won't break everything. We're not asking if the next choke point fails. We're asking when, and what breaks when it does. This is a failure chain. If you want to see the other invisible systems keeping modern life running and exactly how close they are to breaking, hit subscribe. See you in the next collapse.